T9C got the fucking juice.
Silver's the new gold.
Chris, this shit fire.
T9C got the fucking juice.
Silver's the new gold.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the JT Sports Podcast. I'm your host, JT, back at you guys with another episode, man. I didn't plan on live streaming for you guys tonight. The reason for that is because I got class next week. I'm about to begin my final semester of college, so I want to take the next couple of days to just have a little bit of time to myself to lock in on that. But then I started to think of a lot of interesting things to talk about. The Ravens signing Dalvin Cook, so you know we got to talk about that. So we got a really entertaining episode tonight. Washington, I got a big concern about them going into the national championship. FSU, they're 63-3 loss to Georgia in the Orange Bowl. I think it exposed the dark truth about the transfer portal. Stephen A. Smith had the worst college football take of 2024, and we're only 4 days into the new year. I got some thoughts on that. The best team in college football isn't in the national title game. You know, there are a lot of things that we got to discuss on tonight's episode. First of all, before we even start with anything, leave a comment in the chat if you can hear me, because I had some audio issues a couple of minutes ago and I don't know if they're fixed or not. So if you can hear me, just leave me a comment down in the chat. Give me a thumbs up if you're listening live. Remember that if you're not listening live and you're catching this later, that every episode of the podcast that's uploaded on the channel is available in audio format on all podcasting platforms: Apple, Google, Spotify, Amazon, wherever you get your podcast from. You can find the JT Sports Podcast. Leave us with a 5-star review on Apple and Spotify. Share the pod with your friends, family members, and acquaintances if you enjoy. And shout out to everybody that we got in the chat. Shout out to Dubs. He says, JT salute. Shout out to CarCast 49ers Podcast. He says, yo. Dubs says, damn, that went by fast. Been watching you since senior year of high school. I appreciate that, man. I appreciate everybody that's tuned in tonight. I promise y'all, we got a really entertaining episode. And let's get into it, bro. So the NFL might as well just go ahead and give the Baltimore Ravens the damn Super Bowl. It's not even the point in playing the playoffs anymore, bro, because the Ravens are so stacked now. it's damn near going to be impossible for anybody in the AFC to keep these boys from making it to the Super Bowl. They already had Lamar Jackson, who is going to win MVP. They got one of the best rosters in the NFL. They got one of the best O-lines in the league, a top-ranked defense. And you know who they decided to go ahead and sign? They said, you know what? Let's just go bring in Dalvin Cook just because why not? And Dalvin Cook, he was playing for the New York Jets for the majority of this season, but they ended up releasing him. They didn't really use him all that much. And he's pretty fresh to go for the Baltimore Ravens. And they're going to have that first round bye, so they're going to have some more weeks for Dalvin Cook to continue to learn this system, to get some fresh legs. The Ravens have been in the market for another running back. You know, they had the injury early this season to J.K. Dobbins. They lost Keaton Mitchell, who was outstanding rookie that they got, who was an undrafted free agent find. And, you know, they haven't really struggled at the running back position. You got the Gus Bus who's chugging along. You got Justice Hill who has been pretty fine. But anytime you got the opportunity to get a running back like Dalvin Cook, why not if you're Baltimore? Dalvin Cook is not washed up. Like, people keep saying, oh, he didn't do anything with the Jets. The Jets signed Dalvin Cook with the intention of making sure that he would give Breece Hall enough time to fully recover from that injury. But Breece Hall was just so damn good that there was no reason to even need to use Dalvin Cook. You give Dalvin Cook to a team like Baltimore with how good their offensive line is, and he's sharing the backfield with Lamar Jackson? Listen, the rich just keep on getting richer. The football gods just keep on giving the Baltimore Ravens more reasons for why they have to win it all this season. Not only is Dalvin Cook a really good fit in Todd Monken's offense, but he also is a really good threat catching the football out of the backfield, which is one part of this offense that they're lacking in. Is a running back that can be efficient and highly effective in the passing game. And you're going to get that with Dalvin Cook. He's somebody who you can line him out wide in the slot. You can throw him passes out of the backfield. Anyway, anyhow, you want to find a way to get Dalvin involved in the passing game. You're going to be able to find a way to do that with Todd Monken calling the plays. You didn't need Dalvin Cook, but you just go ahead and you sign him anyway. With the New York Jets this season, I don't think he looked too bad when they called his number. It's just that they didn't really call him all that much. So you're getting somebody who's going to have some fresh legs with the running back group, where now he's going to be joining Melvin Gordon as well, which I didn't even know he was even on this damn team still. And you got Justice Hill and Gus Edwards. How are they going to divvy up the carries when playoff time comes around? I mean, it's simple. You give Gus Edwards, you know, about 60% of the workload. You give Justice Hill about 5% of the workload to be the change of pace back, because he is the fastest running back that they got on the roster. And then you give Dalvin Cook 30% of the workload, because when you got a dude like Dalvin Cook and you sign him this late in the season, you just cannot use him for the playoffs. He just can't be for some insurance in case another guy goes down. Like, you need to give Dalvin Cook some legitimate touches, bro. He has fresh legs. He's ready to go. He's fully healthy. And if you're trying to make it to the Super Bowl, Dalvin Cook is going to be really key for you, because you're going to have to take some of the burden off Lamar Jackson. We know that Lamar Jackson is more than capable of being able to carry this team, but part of being able to make a deep playoff run is that you have to be able to play complementary football. You got to be balanced, not just throwing the football and running it with Lamar, but you also have to make sure that you have a running back that can be effective as well. You know what they say, it's a passing league, but when you get up late in the fourth quarter, you got to be able to take time off the clock. With Dalvin Cook, you're going to be able to utilize his ability with how good he still is after contact. He may not be what he used to be when it comes to making things happen, breaking tackles, and getting a lot of yak, but he still is pretty effective. And to me, he still is a top 10 running back in the National Football League, even though we haven't really heard his name being called all that much. Like, there's no shame and getting outworked by a guy like Breece Hall. Breece Hall is a damn monster, all right? But the Ravens have been in the market for a running back for a while. There were some rumors that said at the trade deadline they attempted to reach out to Tennessee for Derrick Henry, but Tennessee had no interest in trading away Derrick Henry at the time. Dalvin Cook going to Baltimore, you might as well just go ahead and give these boys the damn Lombardi trophy right now. It's not even any purpose of playing this thing anymore, bro. It's not fair. You already got a stacked wide receiving core. You got a stacked offensive line. You got the MVP at quarterback. You got the best defense in the National Football League. It's like, damn, what more do you need anymore, bro? Just when you thought the Ravens couldn't get any better, they get more better by bringing in Dalvin Cook, bro. I don't care what y'all try to tell me in the comment section, bro. Dalvin Cook is still one of the best running backs in the NFL, bro. He's still under 30, so he hasn't hit that age where you start to see running backs regress. Okay, I still think that Dalvin Cook has a lot of juice left in the tank. And one thing that people overlook about the Baltimore Ravens is that they do something that no other team in the NFL does. And you know what that is? That's getting the most out of guys who people believe to be past their prime. Prime example, look at Jadeveon Clowney, bro. Nobody's talking about how great Jadeveon Clowney has been for the Ravens this year. This is the best season that he's had in his whole entire NFL career. OBJ people thought was washed up, and he's still been highly productive. And remember a few years back when he had Justin Houston? So if there's any team that can get Dalvin Cook to rewind the clock back to his glory days when he was playing at his best in Minnesota, it is the Baltimore Ravens. There's no team in the National Football League that gets the most out of players who are perceived to be past their prime than what B-More does. I don't know what they do to these veterans. I don't know if they inject them with some super soldier serum or something like that, but they just know how to squeeze all the juice that these older players seem to have. And Dalvin Cook, I wouldn't even consider him to be old. He's still under 30 if I'm not mistaken. The Ravens bringing in Dalvin Cook is another chess piece that Lamar and this offense have to tour around with. And it makes them an even more dangerous team in the postseason. You don't want to play Baltimore. If anything, you want to play Baltimore in the conference championship game. You don't want to have to see them in the divisional round because they're going to send you packing. There's no reason, especially with now you having Dalvin Cook, why you shouldn't be able to go all the way this year, man. This signing just further enforces how this is a Super Bowl or bust season for LaMarvelous and B-More. Dalvin Cook, I'm excited to watch him in Baltimore in the postseason. Now, we got to segue to college football, all right? Now, you guys know that I'm an honorary Washington Huskies fan for this season, and I've been rolling with this team all season long. I picked them to beat Texas, and I'm picking them again to beat Michigan, but I got a big concern about the Huskies going into this game, and I got a lot of money on Washington to win this thing now, all right? And what scares me the most is this defense against Michigan's rushing attack. Washington has a pretty solid defensive line, all right? But they haven't faced an offensive line like Michigan's up until this game. And they haven't seen a team that has this effective as a rushing attack since when they played Oregon State in the latter half of the season. And when they played Oregon State in that game, which is the closest opponent that resembles Michigan the best, Damian Martinez, he went off against them. He had 123 rushing yards. He was averaging 4.7 yards per carry, and he had 2 touchdowns in that game. Now, Washington still won, but when you look back at their game last week when they beat Texas, Texas had a lot of success on the ground. They had one of their running backs in C.J. Baxter, who was damn near at one point averaging almost 10 yards per carry at one point. And Texas, if they would have ran the football a lot more in that game, they probably would have given themselves a better shot at being able to win it. But Steve Sarkisian, he's just such a pass-heavy guy that he got away from the run game, even though that was the most effective way they were moving the football downfield. One thing about Michigan is that we know if there's ever going to be a team that stays committed and dedicated to the run game, it's going to be these guys. You go back and you look at that Penn State game, these fools ran the ball 31 straight times to end that game. And the worst case scenario that could happen to Washington in this game is that Michigan gets that ground game going. They don't get away from it like what Texas did when it's working, and they control time of possession. They tire out that defense, and they keep Washington's high-powered offense off the field. Look, we know that Michigan is the best defense that Washington has seen all season long. But Washington is going to be able to score points on that Wolverines defense. It's just that I'm not expecting them to have the amount of success with the deep passing game like they did against Texas, because Michigan has a way better secondary than Texas, and they have one of the best secondaries in all of college football. So for Washington, I'm not saying that they're not going to have success offensively. I'm saying that I'm not expecting them to be as effective throwing the football in this game as they were last week against Texas, with them going against a marginally better defense. But they're still going to be able to score points on Michigan. I just don't think that they're going to go over 30. I think with them, if they win this game, which I believe they will, it's going to be somewhere between 28, maybe they get to 30, and I don't see them scoring any more than that, because Michigan, they don't allow a lot of big plays in the passing game. They have talent on all levels of their defense. Their defensive line is stout. Their linebackers are stout, and their secondary is stout as well. For Washington, you can't allow yourself to get into a game when Michigan can just run the football at will against you, like how Texas was able to at some point last week when you beat them. You see, Texas isn't a run-heavy team. That's not something that they predicate themselves on. They want to beat you throwing the football. Michigan, they want to get down and dirty with you in the trenches, and they want to say, hey, Washington, you're from the West Coast. We think that you West Coast teams are soft. Show us that you guys have what it takes to match our physicality. And I noticed that a lot of Washington fans got mad at me when I previewed the Texas game, and they were saying, man, like, we get tired of hearing that physical team nonsense. Like, everybody we play is a more physical team than us, supposedly. And that is true to an extent. I do feel like the whole physicality thing with Washington gets a little bit overblown too much, because they're pretty physical in their own right. But when you're going up against Michigan, this team is a sledgehammer. Not only are you about to go into a game against a team like Michigan that's more than capable of being able to slow down your passing attack, but you're going up against a team that specializes in being able to play bully ball. And Washington, regardless of what you Husky fans may say, you're not a team that's built to stop teams that like to play bully ball consistently. You may be able to get a couple of stops in this game when it comes to slowing down Michigan's rushing attack, but your run defense isn't really the strong suit of your defense. And when you look at where Washington ranks statistically when it comes to their run defense, they're around 40th in the nation in rushing yards per game allowed. But anytime they've gone up against a team that has been effective running the football, that is predicated on having success rushing the ball, like Oregon State, they haven't really done a good job of being able to neutralize their rushing attack. And the reason why I use Oregon State as a reference is because Oregon State, as I said a couple of minutes ago, is the team that closely represents or resembles what you're going to be facing in a national title game. There's no team in the Pac-12 that you played this year, maybe outside of Utah, that has the kind of philosophy that Michigan has. Oregon State, they had a lot of success running the football with Damian Martinez. And with you being able to slow down the run game of Oregon, that was impressive. But Oregon isn't a team that offensively, their success is predicated on how well they run the ball. Michigan, if you can slow down their run game and you make them one-dimensional offensively, that would be a huge win for you, and it would drastically put the odds in your favor of you being able to hoist up that college football national title. You see, Michigan's game revolves around them being balanced on offense, not knowing what's coming. They want to mix in the run with the pass. They want to get play action going. They also want to use some design quarterback runs with J.J. McCarthy. If you're Washington, my biggest concern for the Huskies in this game is their run defense. You got a solid defensive line, but you don't have a great defensive line. Your best defensive lineman is Braylon Trice. He's going to be huge when it comes to you being able to slow down this run game of Michigan. And I have a lot of concerns about how Washington's defense is going to match up against the physicality of this Michigan team. Like, when you're going up against Michigan, not only are you suiting up for a football game, but you're about to go to fucking war. There's no team in college football that is as physical as what these boys are, bro. They're running down your throat if you allow them to. And Washington has to come out early, and they got to make a statement. They got to say, no. You're not about to come in here and just run the football and dominate us in the trenches with the run game. You better beat us another way, and it's not going to be with the rushing attack. You got Blake Corum, Donovan Edwards, the best 1-2 punch at running back in college football. J.J. McCarthy, they utilize him a lot in the ground game. It's really pivotal for Washington to make sure that they put all resources available in the keeping Michigan's run game at bay. You may not be able to slow it down, but you can't allow this run game to dictate the outcome of this game because it's not going to go in your favor. You still need possessions offensively. And you're going to score, but you may not be able to score at the rate that you were when you played Texas. Therefore, if Michigan gets the rushing attack going, and let's say they get the ball with 10 minutes left in the fourth quarter, a team like this is possibly able to take 8 minutes off the clock. And then with the fourth quarter, you may only get one more possession with only 2 minutes left. Possessions are at a premium when you go up against a team like Michigan and they're able to just ground and pound you. Washington has a pretty solid defensive line, but it's not a great defensive line. And that's what concerns me. In the rushing attack, you know, they don't really put a lot of emphasis on running the football. They run the football when they need to, but it's not really a necessity. So my biggest concern for Washington in this game isn't really their secondary. I don't believe Michigan is going to just carve up Washington's secondary because Washington's secondary is better than what people give it credit for. They did a pretty good job against Texas. Like, yeah, Texas came on a little bit late in the fourth quarter and Quinn Ewers and company got going. But for the majority of this game, this secondary did a really good job at slowing down Texas passing attack. Michigan isn't a team that's built to beat you the same way that you're built to beat them. You see, what Washington likes to do is they want to basically go vintage Mike Leach. They want to throw the football all over the field against you, and they got the players to do that. But Michigan, they don't have that same level of talent offensively that you do at wide receiver. You see, with Michigan, they can beat you throwing the football, but only once they get that run game going. You see, the run game is an extension of this Michigan offense. When they don't have it, this is a completely different team. You need to make this Michigan team one-dimensional. You can't allow them to get the ground game going at all, and you really can't afford to find yourself in a game where they go over 150. If they get over 150 rushing yards, it's wraps. You're not going to lose this game, and you're not only going to lose a national title, but you're going to lose me a lot of money too, because I got a lot of money on Washington right now. Not only did I pick them to win this game outright, but before the playoffs even started, I put like a couple of $100 down on them winning the national championship, which they had like the least odds to do so. So I thought it was a pretty great bet. Kalen DeBoer is one of the best kept secrets in college football. If they win a national title, he won't be anymore because now everybody's going to know just how great of a coach he is. He has a really great coaching staff. They need to make sure that they can keep this ground game of Michigan at bay, because if they let Michigan take them to Pound Town, I don't think it's going to be pretty for Washington. Your offense is going to score points, but you're not going to be able to score every possession against this Michigan defense. They are going to get a few stops here and there, and if they can get that run game going, they keep your defense on the field, and let's say they go on like a 7-8 play drive, and maybe offensively you only get like 3-4 possessions the whole entire first half. You're going to have to maximize those. And if you can take away that ground game of Michigan and make them one-dimensional when they have to beat you with just J.J. McCarthy's arm, you're going to win this game, and you're going to win it pretty convincingly, because that's not Michigan's strength. They're not a team that's built to beat you throwing the football purely. They got to have that ground game going. They have to use that so they can be balanced. That's a big part of their offense. So that's what really concerns me the most about Washington, is their ability to stop the run against Michigan, because these boys are bullies from the middle portion of the country. Like, the West Coast teams have a stigma that they're more finesse. They're not that great up front. Washington, I don't really think they fit in that stigma, because they do have the ability to have success at times slowing down the run game. It may not just be at the efficiency that you will like. And against Michigan, coming from the middle portion of the country, with Jim Harbaugh being the head coach, all he does is preach trench play and physicality. And they're not going to get away from the run game if it's successful, unlike Texas. If Texas would have ran the ball like 20, 30, 40 times, that would have been a completely different game. So as an honorary Washington fan for this season, for you to finish this historical season and to bring home the championship, you need to make sure that you don't allow Michigan to bully you with the run game. Before we move on, if you haven't already, leave a like, subscribe to the channel. We got a lot more things that we have to discuss on tonight's episode, man. Remember that every episode of the podcast that's uploaded on the channel is available in audio format on all audio platforms or podcasting platforms, Apple, Google, Spotify, Amazon, wherever you get your podcast from. The JT Sports Podcast is available. Shout out to everybody in the chat. My guy, I don't know how to pronounce your name, but he says Harbaugh won't abandon the run unless his team falls behind at least 10 points. Washington's got to start hot, build a lead early, and basically never let up offensively. Yes, sir. Shout out to Gregory Campbell. What's up? What's good, y'all? What's good with you, man? Hope everybody's having a great night. Now, so the best team in college football may not be in the national championship game. There was an odds maker that came out and said that Georgia, if they were in the playoffs this year, they would be favored over every single body. And if they were in the national championship game, they would be a 2-point favorite over Michigan. And this isn't the first time I've heard this. I've seen a lot of Georgia fans say this to me in the comment section, how if they were in the college football playoffs, they would be the favorite to win it all. Here's the thing about this, right? If Georgia is fully healthy, you do have a case of them being considered to be in that conversation to be the number one team in college football. All right, we know that Georgia coming into this past season was the favorite to win it all. Now, they lost to Alabama in the SEC championship game. Some people will say that Alabama just outplayed them. They looked better coached. They were better prepared. And Georgia fans would push back against that. And they would tell you, man, the only reason Alabama won that game was because we weren't at full strength. We didn't have a fully healthy Brock Bowers. We were depleted at wide receiver. So if Georgia's fully healthy, and let's say hypothetically we play into this scenario, they're in the college football playoffs right now, would they truly be better than Washington? Okay. Yeah, you got an argument over that. They would be a better team than Washington just because of how stout they are up front on both sides of the football. Cool. Would they be better than Alabama? Absolutely. If they were to play Alabama again, they would be a favorite in that game. They were a favorite when they played against Alabama in the SEC championship game. Against Texas, they definitely would be a favorite over them. May not be by a huge margin, but it'd probably be by maybe 1-2 points. Against Michigan, as this odds maker put it out, hypothetically, they would be a 2-point favorite. So does Georgia really have a case for being considered the number one team in college football this season, despite not being in the national championship? I really got to say no. All right, because if you are the best team in college football, it doesn't always revolve around how many of your starters are healthy. If you truly are the best team in this sport, you got to have elite depth. And with Georgia having some key injuries to their starters, they didn't have that top level depth that you expect out of a team like Georgia that brings in arguably the best recruiting class damn near every single season. You see, odds makers, when they are making these games, they are strictly going off talent and what they see off paper and analytics. But when these games actually get played, I believe that Georgia wouldn't just roll through everybody like how Georgia fans would suggest. I don't think their secondary is as good as what it's been in the past. Going up against a team like Washington, I definitely still believe that they will be able to have a lot of success against you. Going up against this year's Michigan team, this isn't the Michigan team that you beat the shit out of back in 2021. This is a Michigan team that is just as good as any other team in college football, and they may just be better than what you were this past season up front with how good their offensive line and defensive play was this season. Your defensive line play took a big step back when you had two historically great ones this past 2 seasons. Georgia, to me, if they were in the college football playoffs, I don't think that they would be better than everybody. All right, I still believe that this year's Michigan team is just as good as anybody else in college football. And for the people who say that this is the best team in college football, despite not being a national title, I got to strongly disagree with you, man. Like, if you were the best team in college football, you would be in the playoffs right now because you would be undefeated. Washington had injuries. Texas had some injuries. Texas lost their RB1, who's going to be one of the highest drafted running backs in next year's draft class. Injuries are a part of the game, and you got to be able to overcome them. And you were going up against a Bama team that most people consider to be one of the worst that Nick Saban has ever had to make it into the college football playoffs. And if it wasn't for Michigan having all those damn turnovers, they probably would have beat Alabama by at least maybe 10 or more points. You see, when you went up against Alabama in the SEC championship game, their defense slowed down your offense. That was the least effective that Georgia's offense had looked all season long. Now, of course, that was due to injuries, but what about on the defensive end of things? You weren't able to find a way to consistently stop Jalen Milroe, who pretty much got neutralized against Michigan. You saw what they tried to do on the final play of that game in overtime. They got stuffed. And not just that, but how couldn't you beat Alabama when they had major issues on the offensive line? Their offensive line has been dog shit for around like the last 3-4 seasons. And Nick Saban owns Georgia. He's 5-1 against this team. Like, I picked Georgia to win it all before this season started. All right? And when I release my end of the season top 25, you're going to be in my top 3. But I'm not just going to say that you would be the number 1 team in college football based off this hypotheticals. There's a reason why the games get played. And the only reason I'm talking about this is because I've seen a lot of Georgia fans bring this up in my comment section, especially when they clobber FSU and the Orange Bowl. They keep saying, oh, we're the best team in college football. We'll be favored over everybody. Like, the only reason you would be favored over everybody is because, first of all, your name's Georgia, and because of analytics and what people see on paper. But when the games actually get played, if you would have went up against Texas or Michigan or whoever else, Washington, I don't think you would be a lock to win it. And if you were in the playoffs this year, I don't think you would have been a lock to win it all. Like, this Georgia team is good, or they were good this season, but they weren't as good as what they have been in previous seasons. All right? So for all of the Georgia fans that keep on saying, well, odds makers will have us favored over anybody else in the playoffs, like, that is true, but that's not rooted in anything that we really can go off of and lock it in as a fact, because it's not a fact. Like, you only would be a favorite because your name's Georgia, the helmet that's on your logo, and what you done. You got to play these games. And Washington and Michigan are both in the national championship, despite not being ranked inside of 247 Sports Team Talent Composite rankings, not recruiting at the same level that you do. They use the transfer portal pretty well. They have great coaching staffs. Kalen DeBoer is one of the best coaches in college football. If you would have played Washington, that would have been an incredible matchup, because Kalen DeBoer, Kirby Smart, that would have been a great coaching battle. Who would have won that thing? We don't really know. I still would have took Washington over you. I still don't believe that your defense is as good as what many of you Bulldogs fans try to lead on. So somebody sent me this on Instagram. Odds makers say Georgia would be favored over everybody in the college football playoffs. The best team didn't make the national championship. I got to lock that in as false, man, because if you truly were the best team in college football, you would have found the way to beat Alabama in the SEC title game. Like, Washington had hella injuries during the first half of the season. Like, there was a stretch like 3 to 4 weeks in the middle of the season when Washington wasn't at full strength. They were at like 60-75% at one point. They had the damn flu going around in their locker room. So it's like, I get the fact that Georgia was without some of their best players in the SEC championship game. But at the same time, you're Georgia. You recruit damn near at number 1 or number 2 in the nation every single season. One guy goes down, another guy should be able to step up and be productive. Alabama's defense was really good, but their offense was not that great. And the way their offense looked against you in the SEC championship was really surprising. Like, you expect better defensive play out of Georgia's defense. So I don't think that Georgia is the best team in college football just because the odds makers say they will be favored over everybody. Like, Alabama was an underdog against Michigan. They lost that game. But you were favored against Alabama in the SEC championship, and you lost that game. Washington was a 4-point underdog against Texas, and they won that game. Like, you just can't judge how good a team is based on what these odds say. That's why we bet on these things. That's why Vegas loses money, and that's why they gain money. People are wrong about these things. The odds don't show how the games would go or what the outcome would be. They just give you a metric to go off of. So I don't agree with this narrative that Georgia fans are trying to throw around that they have a case for being the best team in college football just because they would be favored over everybody in the college football playoffs. And I have seen a few Georgia fans comment this in my comment section. Shout out to C-Dog 1983 TV with the $2 donation. He says, hit that like button. It's free. JT Sports, my gosh. Shout out to you, C-Dog 1983 TV. We appreciate the $2 donation. Shout out to everybody in the comment section. Here, Seattle, UW got this easily. Washington wins 42-35, double OT. I got Washington winning, but I don't think it's going to be 42-35. I got Washington winning like 27-24 is my final score prediction. I just can't see Washington scoring more than 30 points on Michigan's defense. Michigan's defense, they run an NFL-style defense. It matches up really well with what Washington likes to do offensively, and they also have 3 really good cornerbacks. Now, I don't know if they have 3 cornerbacks that are like good enough to shut down this wide receiving core, but their cornerbacks definitely are good enough to slow this thing down where they're not getting bombed to hell like how Texas was. It was just bombs away when they were going up against Texas. Now, Stephen A. Smith, only 4 days into the 2024 year, has already managed to deliver one of the worst takes of the year when it comes to college football. Let me start that over. Can we start that over? Okay. So we're only 4 days into 2024, and Stephen A. Smith has already given us college football's worst take of the year. So on First Take the other day, this dude had the audacity to say that the Rose Bowl should be moved to SoFi Stadium. And it just goes to show you that Stephen A. Smith doesn't watch a lot of college football, and he doesn't understand what makes college football the great sport that it is. What makes college football the second most popular sport in America is because of the tradition, the pageantry. Like the Rose Bowl is college football's most iconic stadium. Like the Rose Bowl, people make the argument that it should be hosting a national championship. Now, I don't agree or disagree with that statement. All right? It's just that I understand both arguments of it. But to say that the Rose Bowl should be moved to SoFi Stadium because of traffic, it's hard to get to the stadium, like, that's nonsense to me, Stephen A. Smith. Like, if you want to beat the traffic, guess what you should do? Get there early. There were people who went to this game who left their houses and made it to the stadium at 7:30 a.m. in the morning. If you want to beat traffic, you got to get to these games early. And the traffic at SoFi Stadium isn't no better from what I heard. I got a homie that goes to a lot of Chargers fans, and he says that the traffic is always awful anytime he goes to a Chargers game. Now, the Rose Bowl definitely has to improve the way that you can get to this game because it's only like a one-way path of getting in, so of course it's going to be highly congested. But suggesting that the Rose Bowl being moved to SoFi Stadium would just take away the tradition, which is college football's oldest tradition, by the way. Did you know that the Rose Bowl is college football's oldest bowl game? Like, they made this thing back in 1902. Like, why do people want to continue to water down this sport and continue to shit on this sport all because of the traditions? Well, there's nothing wrong with change. Change has to come eventually. Like, my mom used to tell me that not all change is great change. And the changes of the Rose Bowl location would take away from the game itself. What makes the Rose Bowl such a great experience is where it's at. In Pasadena, California. Like, the city and whoever else pretty much owns this thing. They won't change the time. Like, they have the same kickoff time damn near every single year. Like, the Rose Bowl is one of the best games in all of college football. And changing the location of this game would be the equivalent to all the changes that have occurred in college football when it comes to NIL and the transfer portal. And not a lot of these changes have worked out for the best of the sport. And changing the Rose Bowl would continue to damage what has made college football the sport that it is today. Like, I don't get why all these talking heads and the national media fail to realize what makes college football so great. The pageantry, the traditions, the stadium atmosphere, the atmosphere that you get at the Rose Bowl can't be replicated at SoFi Stadium. It's not about, oh, how great the stadium looks and shit like that. It's about celebrating the tradition of this sport, which is the Rose Bowl. The Rose Bowl is the heart and soul of college football. And it really irks me how people just seem to not really understand why college football is great because of the traditions. It seems like people don't really have a high level of admiration for the tradition and the pageantry of college football. And that's why I love college football. I'm not one of those people that think that the NFL is better or college football is better than the NFL. Like, I enjoy watching both products because I'm just a diehard lover of football. I eat, breathe, and shit football, bro. I wake up thinking about football every single day. So for Stephen A to make these comments further demonstrates how this dude doesn't really follow college football like that. He doesn't really have a great understanding of what makes the sport the sport. The sport is what it is because of the traditions, because of the stadiums. If you want to find a way to beat traffic, get to the damn thing earlier. This thing was sold out. Like, I was kind of jealous going on X and seeing everybody post videos being at the Rose Bowl with the jets flying over the stadium, taking pictures of the sunset. Like, my goal for this year, one of my New Year's resolutions, is to save up enough money so I can go to next year's Rose Bowl. Because not only is it a spectacle, but it's one of those memories that sticks with you for a lifetime. Like, I was watching Josh Pate's story when he went to the Rose Bowl and he was recording all these videos. I was so jealous. I was like, bro, I got to get to a Rose Bowl game before I die, bro. Like, I love college football, and I hate the fact that people come on here and they want to just try to erase the tradition of this sport. Well, change has to happen eventually. The change that we've gotten in college football has made this sport worse. In a sense of, yeah, the ratings are up and things like that, but look at all the madness that we got in the transfer portal. Look at the madness that we got from NIL. Like, the Orange Bowl and the Cotton Bowl aren't even the same anymore. The Orange Bowl used to be such a bigger bowl game than what it is now. Like, you literally have people calling the Orange Bowl meaningless. You see, when you change the locations of these events, you change the events themselves. What makes the Rose Bowl is the Rose Bowl parade, the celebration that they have, the pregame traditions that they have. Traditions is what makes college football great. And I know I keep sounding repetitive, but a lot of people who aren't diehard college football fans who just casually watch the sport miss the big reason of what makes this sport tick. Like, you get people who always complain about the stadiums and whatnot. Like, the stadiums are like landmarks in college football. That's why they don't make a lot of renovations to them, because how they look, the model of how they're built is contributing to the overall atmosphere. It's what gives the sport identity. You see, like, if you don't care that much about tradition and culture, you watch the NFL. The NFL isn't really about traditions. They don't really have any traditions at certain NFL stadiums that you go to. If you go to a Jaguars game, they're going to be playing the same music there that they're going to be playing at Arrowhead Stadium. Same thing if you were to go to a Baltimore Ravens game. Like, these stadiums may have a few things that makes them different in the NFL, but overall, going to an NFL game, no matter who you're watching play, it's the same experience anywhere you go. Going to a college football game, though, going to the Rose Bowl isn't the same experience that you would get if you were to go to a Cotton Bowl or if you were to go to an Orange Bowl event. You see, like, Stephen A. Smith, with this take, and a lot of his co-hosts, like, none of his co-hosts agree with this. Like, Marcus Spears was saying, Stephen A., like, just stop it. Like, he kind of looked a little bit embarrassed of what Stephen A. Smith was saying. Like, change the Rose Bowl location, the SoFi Stadium. Like, are you mad, Stephen A. Smith? Are you mad? Like, Stephen A. Smith, I know you're probably not going to watch this, but if you do watch this, I hope that this segment gave you a little bit of an education of what makes college football this great sport, the second most popular sport in America. Not just the games, but the tradition. College football is rooted in pageantry. And it took me a while to understand this. I'm only 21 years old, going on 22 years old, and I never understood why some of the old head fans of this sport who've been watching since the 60s and 70s used to get so pissed off with the transfer portal, the new regulations, the new rules, the NIL and whatnot. And now the more and more I continue to watch this sport, the more I start to understand why traditionalists push back against the changes that are getting implemented in college football. It's because they don't understand the traditions that have made college football the sport that it is today. Going to a college football game is like the equivalent to going to a damn Super Bowl in a sense, although it's not the same magnitude. We know that the Super Bowl is the biggest sporting spectacle in the world outside of the World Cup. But, you know, it's just, I just hate how people just try to shit on traditions in college football just because they're old. They may seem like they're out of touch. Like, I disagree with that, bro. I love college football. And the reason why I love college football is because of the Rose Bowl, because of what the Cotton Bowl used to be, because of what the Orange Bowl used to be. You see, college football is dipped and rooted in tradition and pageantry. And when you change the location of the Rose Bowl, you change what the game is. There are players who dream of playing in a Rose Bowl because they want to play in that stadium. So Stephen A. Smith, bro, this was the worst take when it comes to college football that I've heard. Only 4 days into 2024, man. Like, this was an awful take, Stephen A. Smith. Like, you definitely missed on this one. I love you, bro. I got nothing against you, bro. I like listening to your podcast, Stephen A. World, every once in a while, bro. Really entertaining, and you're a really entertaining person, bro. But, man, you really missed on this one, bro. This was a giant miss. This was a huge air ball for you, bro. Shout out to Mace Taggart with the $5 super chat. He says, appreciate your grind, megastar. I would love to have you pull up on my All Sports platform. I'll hit you up on your DM superstar. Appreciate you, family. I appreciate the donation, man. And I would definitely be looking forward to your DM wherever you DM me at, X, Instagram, wherever. I'm going to definitely respond to you, man. I appreciate your $5 donation, man. Like, if you guys are listening, bro, let me know if I'm tripping with what I just said with the Rose Bowl, bro, because a lot of people who don't really follow college football that heavy, you really can tell because they're saying things that Stephen A. Smith just uttered on national television. Like, what makes college football great is the traditions of these stadiums, the atmosphere that you get. The atmosphere that you get going to the Rose Bowl can't be replicated in SoFi Stadium. Like, let me know if I'm tripping, bro, but what makes the sport is the history, the traditions, the stadiums, the mascots, even hell, the fans. Like, that's just crazy to me that Stephen A. Smith really uttered that on national television, that the Rose Bowl location needs to change. That's crazy to me. That's absolutely ludicrous. Now, Mike Norvell, I saw his post-game speech after they got annihilated by Georgia in the Orange Bowl. It was going viral, and I really loved the message that he reiterated to his team after that game. Now, I saw a lot of FSU fans in the comment section of that video saying that, oh, well, we understand the opt-outs. They were so demoralized with not getting the opportunity to pursue their dream of chasing a national championship, and that's just bullshit to me. All right, I don't like saying that players quit on their team, but I truthfully believe that all the players that opted out of FSU's Orange Bowl against Georgia really quit on this program. All right? And I'm normally not somebody who likes to say players quit because they opt out. I understand that it's a business decision. There's millions of dollars that are at stake. But when you get robbed of the opportunity to get into the college football playoffs and you're undefeated, you would at least think that you would like to finish what you started and you would like to go out with the undefeated record, and you wouldn't allow yourself to watch your team, the program that offered you the opportunity to play this wonderful sport, to get clobbered and embarrassed the way that they did against Georgia. Like, Georgia really laid it on them. And Mike Norvell, during that post-game pep talk that he gave his team, he said that y'all didn't deserve to go out there and have that happen to y'all, and y'all didn't. Florida State deserved to go out there and have a competitive game with Georgia in the Orange Bowl, but they didn't because the players opted out. Why did the players opt out? Oh, well, they had to protect their draft status, JT. There's no reason for them to suit up and risk them getting hurt and risking millions of dollars for a meaningless bowl game. Yeah, meaningless bowl game. If these bowl games are so meaningless, tell me why last year Alabama didn't make it to the playoffs. They had Bryce Young, Will Anderson, and Jahmyr Gibbs all suit up for their game against Kansas State. That game wasn't meaningless to them. You see, Will Anderson, he said that, man, it would be ashamed if I didn't play my final game at Alabama and finish what I started. You see, Florida State's opt-out shows the dark truth about the transfer portal. You see, when you built the team through the transfer portal, you're not going to have guys who are going to be coming into your program with a lot of pride for the university, as opposed to somebody who you recruit and you develop for 3 to 4 years. Those Michigan players, even if they didn't get into the playoffs, they still would have played in their bowl game. You want to know why? Because they got a lot of love and admiration for Michigan football. Same thing for those Alabama players. Every time they put on that uniform, it's another opportunity to represent the university, to show school pride. When you assemble a roster through the transfer portal, you're not going to get that. You're not going to get players who are coming in who didn't, play for your program for 3-4 years. You're going to get players that are coming in for one season just to better position themselves, whether it be draft position or to get more money from NIL or whatever. You don't have a strong culture that gets built when your team is mostly assembled through the transfer portal, like how FSU team was this season. Even Ohio State, Honda McCord and Marvin Harrison Jr. opted out, but Travion Henderson still played. JTT still played. There were a lot of players in Ohio State's lost to Missouri in the Cotton Bowl that played in that game. You want to know why? Because they were recruited out of high school and they got a lot of pride for that program. When you recruit a guy and you develop them for 3-4 years, they have a certain amount of dedication, a certain level of commitment to the program that they want to leave it better than where they found it. Will Anderson and Bryce Young, they got recruited by Nick Saban at Alabama. They felt a certain level of depth that they owed to the university to make sure that, we didn't make it to the playoffs. We don't have a shot of winning the national championship, but at least we have the opportunity to go out on top and leave a legacy somewhat. You see, these Florida State players, you didn't really recruit most of these guys. You didn't recruit these guys out of high school, so they don't have the same level of skin in the game with your university as opposed to somebody who you recruit. You see, these Florida State players, why they opted out wasn't because they were just so demoralized because they didn't get into the playoffs. They opted out because they didn't see any reason of playing in this game. And the reason why they viewed this game meaningless just further proves my point. You see, these Bama players, I can't recall any player for Alabama that's ever opted out of a bowl game for Nick Saban. Hell, even a few years back when they beat the shit out of Michigan in the Citrus Bowl, Jalen Waddle, Jerry Jeudy, all played in that game. Christian Baltimore played in those games. All those guys were high draft picks. They didn't care about getting injured. They cared about representing their school, putting on that uniform one more time and making sure that they left Alabama on a high note. These FSU players, they didn't give a fuck about it. They cared about getting into the playoffs, and you can say all you want to about how they got cheated out of the opportunity, but you had the opportunity to go out there and prove the committee wrong. You had the opportunity to show the whole entire world that you deserve to be in. And instead, you opt out. You put your program in a situation where they didn't even have enough depth at running back, where they had to have some of the wide receivers taking carries at running back. That's how down bad FSU was in. Well, that's how bad of a situation Florida State was in due to these opt-outs, bro. These players didn't have a lot of school pride. And how can you expect them to have school pride when you didn't recruit them? You just got Keon Coleman. He's only been with the program for only a year or so. So, of course, he isn't going to have that same level of commitment to want to finish what they started. You see, I'm not trying to say that these players are entirely selfish, but what I am saying is that these players, when you don't recruit these guys into your program and you just get these guys from the transfer portal as 1-year rentals, you can't expect them to put their heart into the program because they don't have the same level of time as other guys have at schools like Bama and Ohio State. And it's funny how we all yell at Dabo Swinney for how you got to use the transfer portal, Dabo. You got to use it. You're putting yourself at a disadvantage. But now, after seeing what transpired in that Orange Bowl between FSU and Georgia, which pretty much was a funeral, as I put it, I understand 110% why Dabo Swinney doesn't like dabbling in the transfer portal all that much. Because when you bring in outsiders into your program who don't have that same level of commitment, to your program, you get a lot of opt-outs. Why would I opt out and risk my draft status for this university? Well, ask Will Anderson and Bryce Young that same question, and it will give you a different answer. They feel like they owed Alabama something. They feel like if they opted out of Alabama's bowl game against Kansas State, then they would have left a lot of food on the table. And they would have put their program at a disadvantage and a disservice. And it kind of would have been a little bit selfish in their eyes to not finish what they started. They wanted to follow through with their plan. They wanted to follow through with the vision. And although the vision didn't go the way that they completely thought it would, you know, being able to cap off their Alabama career with a national title, at least they were able to say, you know, we gave it our all. We put our blood, sweat, and tears into this program, and we're going to make sure that we leave out with a W. These Florida State players, they didn't have that same mindset. And I'm not saying that it's entirely anything wrong with that, protecting your potential millions that you're going to get in the National Football League. But where I do see a problem is that when you assemble a team mostly through the portal, you're not going to get guys that are 110% bought into your program. I don't think it's a culture issue in Florida State. All right, Mike Norvell is a fantastic coach. And after listening to that post-game speech that he gave to his boys after that blowout, shows me that not only is he a great coach, but he's also somebody that these players love to go to war for. But you see, this whole situation isn't an indictment on him. It's an indictment on this new era of college football involving NIL and the transfer portal. These players aren't transferring to a school because they love the university. They're transferring for business decisions, whether that be the opportunity to have a chance of starting, getting more money. Who cares really what the reasons are? But when you transfer to a school, you're only doing it for your self-benefit. And it's the same thing when you get recruited out of high school, but when you commit to a school out of high school, you feel me? And you spend 3-4 years with that program, you know what you develop? You develop a love, a passion. You develop school pride. The longer you stay at a university, the more pride that you have for that university. You look at those Michigan players, bro, they leave it all out on the field every single time they play. Even if they didn't make it into the playoffs this year, everybody still would have played. That's what happens when you have a team that's mostly built through recruiting. You don't have a lot of outsiders coming in with different vendettas. You don't have anybody making business decisions. Like all those players that play for Michigan have school pride. They have a lot of love for Michigan football. When they put on that helmet, they leave it all on the line. When they lost to Ohio State, a few years back when Michigan was getting drugged through the mud by Urban Meyer on Ohio State before they started to turn this rivalry around, there were players that used to cry after the game, fam. You want to know why they cried? Because they loved the university so much that they wanted to make sure that they won that rivalry game because they understand how much these rivalries mean to these programs. You don't develop that kind of love for a school unless you spend multiple years with that program. And hell, Jahmyr Gibbs didn't even spend all that much time with Alabama, but he decided to play in that game because nobody else was opting out. So if nobody else was opting out, why would he opt out? If Bryce Young and Will Anderson are about to be top 10 picks and they're putting their body on the line because they want to make sure that they leave going out on top, then why wouldn't I do the same thing? So it's kind of like a trickle-down effect. When one player opts out, everybody else starts to opt out. When everybody starts to want to play and want to have a drive of being able to lead their program with the season that they're going to remember forever, everybody else is going to buy in. When you get guys from the transfer portal, it's hard to get those guys to buy in into your program and the philosophy that you want to have versus recruiting somebody who has spent 3-4 years for that program. When you recruit guys out of high school and they stay with your university for a long period of time, there's more school pride, and their pride will be so strong that they could even allow themselves to not play in a game of this magnitude. Meaningless? Meaningless to who? The bowl games weren't meaningless to Alabama when all their first rounders were playing. It wasn't meaningless to the first round picks that were playing for Ohio State. Like, they had JTT playing. They had a couple of guys who were going to be high first rounders. or potential high draft picks in next year's draft or this year's draft who decided to leave it all on the line and give it one more go to make sure that they could leave Ohio State on top. So, like, all these FSU fans that are making all these excuses, using, they were so demoralized, they were so heartbroken because they got cheated out of the playoffs. Like, that's bullshit to me, man. And this is the first time in my whole entire life being a college football fan that I've ever felt this way about players opting out. Like, it really surprised me that all of Florida State's key players decided not to play in the Orange Bowl, bruh. It really did. I really thought that these boys were going to have the mindset that, we ain't getting into the college football playoffs, but that's okay. We're going to play in this game because we love the university. And before you say, man, JT, they made millions off these dudes. They don't really care about the student athlete. If they didn't care about the student athlete, they never would have gave them a scholarship, and they wouldn't be giving them NIL money. They wouldn't be giving them NIL opportunities. These players are getting paid now. And I just feel like if you're head coach Mike Norvell, it has to leave a bitter taste in your mouth. It really does, bro, because you could have went out there and really gave Georgia a competitive game. Who cares if you still would have lost by 10 points? It's not about that. It's about going out there and representing your university, showcasing school pride. That's what makes college football such a great sport. Not just because of how entertaining the games are, but you want to know why these rivalry games get such a high viewership? You want to know why the Michigan-Ohio State rivalry means so much? It's not just because you got two big-time brands going head-to-head, but it's because these players really want to win because they got school pride. Those Ohio State players, they were broken that they lost to Michigan once again. Marvin Harrison Jr. is damn near contemplating coming back to Ohio State. At one point, he did contemplate going back to Ohio State because he felt like he was a little bit unfulfilled. He wanted to win a Big Ten title and beat Michigan, and he never got a chance to experience that throughout his Ohio State career. That school pride. Will Anderson, Bryce Young had school pride that they wanted to risk their draft status just to have one more shot at making sure that they can leave Alabama with one more win. So if Alabama and Ohio State can have guys playing and not opting out who are going to be first-round picks, why couldn't Florida State have the same? Why? Because of the transfer portal. And that's the dark truth of the transfer portal that not a lot of people talk about. You can't build a culture by just assembling a whole entire roster full of guys who are going to be gone from your program in a year or two. For you to build an actual culture in college football, you got to have guys who spend time and put in the blood, sweat, and tears with that program. Because when you spend more time with the school, you develop more fondness towards the school. My high school, for example, when I played high school ball, when I went to my high school, bro, I loved my high school, bro. There was never a single day that I woke up that I said, damn, bro, like I hate going to this school, bro. I loved my high school. Hell, I still donate to my high school from time to time. You want to know why? Because I spent all 4 years with that school. My high school that I went to was the only school in my whole entire life that I ever got the chance to start day one as a freshman and then graduate as a senior without ever having to change schools or locations. So the more time I spent with that school, the more of a fondness I developed towards it. I developed a relationship with nearly all my teachers. You don't know how good it felt, walking in my first day senior year, and even some of the teachers that I didn't have that I've had in the past walking past me in the hallway saying, JT, like, oh my God, you gotten so big. Like, oh my goodness, I remember when you was just like this. Like, that's love. That's passion. That's pride. And we don't have a lot of it in today's college football. And I really felt bad watching Florida State get drug around the field like that. And you want to know what those players did by them deciding to opt out of Florida State's Orange Bowl game? Mike Norvell can say that the regular season and what they did is going to be remembered forever. Yeah, for Florida State fans and the players maybe that played that season. But for the rest of us, nobody in the next 10 years is going to remember FSU going 13-0 and winning the ACC championship. All people are going to remember is that they got left out of the playoffs and they got their ass kicked by Georgia in the Orange Bowl. And with that loss, you now have people using it as justification for why you shouldn't have been in the playoffs in the first place. You see, like, those Georgia players, bro, not only were they ready for that game, but they went into that game wanting to really give it to Florida State. They wanted to embarrass Florida State. Like, Kirby Smart had Will Muschamp's son in that quarterback, bro. They had, like, walk-ons, like practice squad people playing in that bowl game, running it up. They were having fun out there. Meanwhile, FSU players, I know it had to be a hard experience. You, at one point, you just wanted the game to be over. Hell, Mike Norvell, I wish they would have interviewed him at halftime because I really wanted to know what his thoughts were about what was going on. I really wish they would, bro, because this whole transfer portal thing is why bowl games have become meaningless. It really is. And I got so much more that I want to say about this, but I'm not going to continue to drag this on. I'm going to end this segment with this, bro. If you're a Florida State fan, I'm tired of hearing this whole excuse about, oh, they were so demoralized because they didn't get into the playoffs. Life isn't fair. We don't always get what we feel we earned. And Mike Norvell, and even in his post-game speech to his team, he said that you can put in hard work and still not get the success that you feel you deserve. Just because you work hard doesn't always mean that you're going to get the desired outcome. Just because Florida State went 13-0, went undefeated in a Power 5 conference, doesn't mean that they have the right to be in the college football playoffs. Nothing is a right. Nothing is a privilege. Everything that you get in life, you have to earn. And even if you feel like you earned it, you don't always get what you feel you deserve. That's just life. And I know you FSU fans don't want to hear it, but it's just the truth. You felt like you deserved aspiring to the college football playoffs, and you didn't get it. So what do? What's your answer? You decide to opt out of the bowl game. Oh, yeah, you really gave it to the NCAA. You really showed the committee, didn't you? You say, man, fuck this. We ain't getting to the playoffs, so we're going to opt out. We're going to show the committee, all right. Yeah, you showed the committee. You showed the committee why they were right to leave you out. You got splattered by Georgia. You got embarrassed by Georgia. And I don't even know how any of the FSU players that decided to opt out could even watch that game. Like, if I was a FSU player who decided to opt out of that game and I was watching that thing, like, I would low-key feel a little bit embarrassed that I allowed my team to go through that. And I'm not one of those people that anytime a player opts out that screams, oh, they're quitting on team. They're quitters. I'm not one of those people. But with how the committee did Florida State, I really would have thought that these players would have had a strong sense of pride that they wouldn't want to see FSU go out the way they did, getting skull dragged by Georgia 63-6, because it kind of puts a stain on what was a really fantastic season for FSU football. But that's just me. I know everybody doesn't have the same thinking, but it's just disheartening to, listen to Mike Norvell's post-game speech and what he said to the team, like, he really loved those guys in the locker room. He appreciated that all those players decided to play in that game. Even when they could have opted the opt-out and hit the transfer portal or whatever, the fact that they decided to go through that shows character. Games like that, getting dragged in the Orange Bowl by Georgia in that fashion, builds character. Like, those players left it all on the field, and I believe it. Georgia just was the outright better team. Like, you got Georgia fans saying, man, we had just as many opt-outs. Like, bullshit, man. You recruit nearly either the second or number one recruiting class every single year. Your backup, your second and third string, if Georgia had a team just full of their second and third stringers, they would still be a top 25 team. You were going up against an FSU team that was lacking depth, and didn't recruit on the same level that you've been recruiting at for the last 3 years. So, of course, you were going to embarrass them, man. I'm sorry that this segment took so long, but I felt really passionate about this, bro. Because it really shocked me that these FSU players, their best players like Keon Coleman, Johnny Wilson, Trey Benson, didn't play in this game. They didn't want to make sure that they allow FSU football to be remembered for the great season that they had. Yeah, I get what Mike Norvell said, but at the end of the day, bro, you're going to remember that season. A lot of other people, we ain't even going to remember this in the next couple of years, bro. We're just going to remember how it ends. Nobody remembers how the story begins, but a lot of people always remember how it ends. and how this season ended for Florida State, bro, was on a really, really disappointing note. Before we get into our last couple of topics, if you haven't already, leave a like, subscribe to the channel. Shout out to everybody in the chat. Mace Taggart, appreciate the $2 donation. He says we have to hook up and chop it up, Meg Star. Goddamn. Everybody seems to be saying that my last segment was cooking, man. Like, it really was, bro, because I get tired of seeing FSU fans defend these players for opting out. Like, they quit. They had the chance to finish what they started. And what they started was a historically great season, one of the best seasons in FSU football, and it got ruined because they wanted to opt out. Because, we're going to stick it to the committee. We're going to show the committee all right. Like, what did you opting out show the committee? Nothing. Nothing at all. I don't want to hear no excuses about draft stock and all that when I've never seen Nick Saban have any opt-outs. JT Memorial for Ohio State, he's going to be a top 15 pick potentially in next year's draft. He played in that game. Emeka Egbuka, he potentially could be a first or second rounder. He played in Ohio State's bowl game against Missouri. So if Alabama and Ohio State are having their best players play, maybe not all of them. Yeah, Marvin Harrison opt out, Kyle McCord hit the transfer portal, but you still had a lot of their starters who played in that game. You want to know why? Because they had skin in the game with that program. They had pride. When you get players through the transfer portal, you don't get that same level of pride. You don't get that same level of commitment. And that's why college football now has this term called meaningless bowl games. No, the bowl games ain't meaningless. They ain't meaningless to Ohio State players that are playing in them. They ain't meaningless to Bryce Young and Will Anderson and Jahmyr Gibbs. And Jahmyr Gibbs wasn't even recruited by Bama. He was a transfer portal guy. He played in that game because everybody else was playing in that game. Guys who served ties with that program for 3-4 years. He said, what would that look like opting out of the bowl game when guys who've been with this university for 3-4 years are playing in it? Like, what? And Bryce Young is going to be a top 5 pick and so is Will Anderson and I'm not going to play in it? Like, how would I look? You know, like that. You would think that these Florida State players would have wanted to leave a legacy. Your legacy is really you going to want to be remembered for, yeah, you went 13-0, won the ACC, but you opted out and you allowed FSU to get their ass kicked by Georgia? You got Kirby Smart throwing in random dudes who probably would never even play another snap for Georgia again in the game, like running it up. You got Will Muschamp's son running it up? Like, are you serious? Even Kirby Smart after the game said they didn't deserve that. And they're the ones who delivered the ass whooping. Anytime you got a team that just kicked your butt like that, saying that you didn't deserve that, that's a problem. That's a big problem. A big problem. Like, Brock Bowers opted out, cool, you can use that, but it's just a little bit different. Like, these FSU players had a reason to play in this game. They could have played in this game for pride and to really send a message to the committee. If they would have beaten Georgia, the whole narrative would have changed. Like, you could have did what UCF did. UCF didn't make it to the playoffs a few years back, but they went undefeated. They beat Auburn in the Peach Bowl, and they hung up that banner how they are national champions. The only team to go unbeaten. Like, I don't know how they're able to do that. Like, that I don't know. You didn't really win the national championship, so I don't even know how you're allowed to do that, but it's permitted. Like, at least you could have claimed that we went undefeated. You feel me? You could have hung a rafter up in your stadium saying 14-0, Orange Bowl champions, ACC champions, but instead, you get to hang up that 13-1 banner. ACC champions, but you ain't going to show that Orange Bowl result, though. You ain't going to show that. Like, I'm just so shocked that Florida State's best players didn't choose to play in that game. I don't want to hear anything about first round picks and whatnot, bro, because majority of those guys who opted out aren't going in the first round anyway. Just being honest, bro. Johnny Wilson is not going to be a first round pick. Trey Benson, maybe, but running backs aren't going high in the first round like that anymore. Like, if Will Anderson and Bryce Young and Jahmyr Gibbs are playing in their bowl game, why couldn't they play in their bowl game? Messing with the whole coping mechanism people want to use, bro. Like, they quit on Florida State. I felt bad for Mike Norvell listening to that, bro. He damn near made me tear up. Like, I wish I could have played for Mike Norvell in that game. Like, Mike Norvell is a great coach. I don't think it has anything to do with the culture that he's built down there. It's just the culture that you have in your locker room when you have a team that's mostly built through the portal. players who only been with the team for 1 year, they're not going to have the desire. They're not going to have that same level of school pride. SEC and Oklahoma, welcome to the SEC. Let's go, let's go. You're finally with the big boys now, man. Are you going to be able to hang with the big boys, though? Because, I mean, this ain't the Big 12 anymore. They play defense in the SEC, Brent Venables. So you can't be allowing, scrubs like UCF to be making a mockery out of your defense. You actually got to be able to show up and match the physicality of a school like Alabama or Tennessee or LSU, even though LSU wasn't playing too much defense themselves. And Texas, you beat up on the weak Big 12, but when you went up against Washington in the Sugar Bowl, bro, your defense had no answers for Michael Penix and company. So how are Texas and Oklahoma going to fare in the Southeastern Conference, now the best conference in college football? Are they going to get a reality check their first year in the SEC? Are they going to get humbled in the SEC? I believe that Texas is going to be perfectly fine in the SEC. I don't know about Oklahoma. I got to see more out of Brent Venables. It's like Oklahoma this past season only cared about beating Texas. And once they beat Texas, that's their Super Bowl. They want the same team after that. Texas, on the other hand, unless Steve Sarkisian just falls off as a head coach and he gets exposed in this conference, Texas is going to be right up there with Alabama, Georgia, and whoever else competing for the SEC championship. One, the talent's there for Texas. And two, they got more money than any other team in this conference, bro. Texas can buy anybody they want from high school or anybody they want from the transfer portal with how big and deep their wallets are down there. So talent is not going to be an issue. There's not going to be a single game that any Longhorn fans or anybody can make an excuse for Texas losing, saying that, oh, they were the more talented team. You were the fourth most talented team in college football this past season, according to 247's team talent composite rankings. So if Texas just falls off in the SEC this year, it's going to be because Steve Sarkisian was a fraud. Now, there are going to be some growing pains in this conference. There is going to be a little bit of an adjustment period. But like Josh Pate worded it, the SEC teams that you're playing against, they're going to have to adjust to you. You see, I believe Texas is going to be perfectly fine. People seem to fail to realize that when you get the right coach at a school like Texas, it doesn't matter where they're playing football. They could be playing in the MAC conference for all we care, and they still would be just as good as anybody else. You want to know why? Because it's Texas. They got money. They got resources. They got that blue blood label. They got that logo on the side of their helmet that is really recognizable to even the average casual college football fan. Everybody knows what Texas football is. Okay, so unless Steve Sarkisian just becomes a shithead coach out of nowhere, Texas is going to be perfectly fine in the SEC. They're not going to struggle. When you recruit at the level that Texas does, and you're able just to buy the best team in college football nearly year after year after year, it's going to be pretty hard for them not to be able to find ways to have success in this conference. Now, Oklahoma, on the other hand, I don't think Oklahoma is going to become irrelevant in the SEC, but I don't think that they're going to be competing for SEC titles in this conference. And I could definitely be wrong. I like Brent Venables as a coach, but I just don't think that Oklahoma right now going into 2024 is going to be any more than a middle-of-the-pack SEC team. You see, when Texas went to the SEC, we know about the resources and the deep pockets that they have, and we know that Steve Sarkisian is a pretty good coach, and they just went to the playoffs. Meanwhile, you look at Oklahoma and the way their season ended. You lost in your bowl game to Arizona, you ran into the Gus bus. What the hell happened to Oklahoma during the second half of this season? It seems like we still don't really know just how good of a coach Brent Venables is. We know he's a decent coach. I don't believe that Oklahoma is going to be what some people say, they're going to go to the SEC and they're going to become what Nebraska has become in the Big Ten. I ain't going to go that far because they recruit at a pretty high level. Jackson Arnold was one of the highest recruits coming out of his recruiting class. They got money and they got some pretty big wallets too, but not as big as Texas wallets. And, they just lost their offensive coordinator, Jeff Lebby, who was the head coach of Mississippi State. Some Sooners fans would say that's not that big of a loss, but you still have to be able to put together a great coaching staff, and we still yet to see Oklahoma's defense look elite. And going into the SEC, like, I have major questions about Oklahoma. Like, Jackson Arnold, like, you hope that this dude plays better, and I believe that he will play better, but is he good enough to get them over the top in a conference like this? Like, is Brent Venables' defense finally going to look like elite defense? You see, the SEC is no cakewalk. And I'm not saying that Texas and OU aren't going to be able to hang in this conference. I believe Texas is going to hang around. I don't know about Oklahoma. Like, Texas is going to be one of the best teams in this conference this upcoming season, 7 months away. Oklahoma, you're possibly going to be fighting for fourth place at best in the SEC this season. Like, your defense hasn't shown me any reason to be optimistic about it. I can trust Texas defense. I know that Texas is going to be ready to play when they go up against anybody. I don't know about you. Like, your defense got shredded by UCF. You lost to fucking Kansas. Like, come on, bruh. Like, you coming into the SEC and you kind of making the SEC look a little bit bad. Like, them boys just lost to Kansas. This is what's coming into the SEC. Like, for Oklahoma, they're really going to have to make some tremendous improvements. Their player development is going to have to be outstanding, because I still don't believe Oklahoma is where they need to be up front on the offensive line, the defensive line, to be able to really compete for a conference title in this conference. Even if you would have had Lincoln Riley, like, I still would have been looking at Oklahoma a little bit differently if you had Lincoln Riley coming to the SEC. And I see why he did for the Pac-12. Like, he went to USC and they're in the Big Ten. And there's questions about Lincoln Riley that we're going to get answered this coming season. But you look at Oklahoma and Texas and the SEC, like, I don't think neither one of these programs are going to bottom out. Like, even if you don't like Oklahoma and Texas, I think we can all be honest and all agree. Can we all agree with this, that neither one of these two programs is going to become like losing programs where like they're winning less than 6 games, like with decent head coaches? Like, with a decent head coach, just based on the talent that you have in this conference, you should at least be able to win 6 games. Okay, like, I don't think that's too unreasonable. Now, in Oklahoma, since it's just like the coaching has to be better, because I saw a lot of bad coaching decisions by Brent Venables. That defense getting shredded by UCF in the Gus Bus. You're losing to Kansas. Like, come on, bro. You're Oklahoma. I don't care how good Kansas is, bro. Like, when you're a school like Oklahoma, you should be beating teams like Kansas. Like, losing to Kansas, if you're Oklahoma, is the equivalent to if you would have lost to fucking Vanderbilt. Like, if Oklahoma was to come into this conference and they lose to Vanderbilt, like, that's problematic. Like, when you're a school like Oklahoma, you got to beat the teams you're supposed to beat, bruh. You can't be losing to no damn, Kansas, Oklahoma State, even though that is your rival. No disrespect to all my Pokies brethren out there that are subscribed to the channel, but I'm just saying, like, if there's anybody who I got concerns about, Texas is the least of my worries. You should be least concerned about Texas. Like, these boys got money, they got deep pockets, and they got a pretty good coaching staff. Steve Sarkisian is a really good head coach. All right, and you got Arch Manning, who I'm pretty confident he's going to be able to live up to the hype. He isn't going to be able to play for the first 2 years. That's perfect for him. He's going to be able to sit, learn behind Quinn Ewers, continue to get acclimated to the playbook. Texas is going to be fine for the future. Oklahoma, they got the roster, they got the talent to be a good team in this conference, to maybe be able to compete, but I still have reservations about the coaching staff. All right, and I still don't really know about Jackson Arnold. Like, I know he was a true freshman, but Nico Imamaviava, I hope I pronounced that right. I know I probably didn't, but just help me in the comment section, give me the little name pronunciation thing so I can get better with learning how to pronounce it. But I feel confident about how Nico is going to have Tennessee looking next year. Like, he ain't come out struggling against Iowa, and Iowa has a way better defense than Arizona. Like, this is the same Arizona team that damn near lost to Colorado with no offensive line. Like, come on, man. Like, I have more concerns about Oklahoma in the SEC than I do Texas. I don't think Texas is going to miss a beat in this conference. Like, my biggest fear with the SEC, with Texas and Oklahoma being in it, is that this conference is going to be just so stacked that everybody's going to cannibalize each other. And it's going to be hard to make the argument that this is still the best conference in college football when you may not have any undefeated teams. Like, if you go undefeated in the SEC, bro, like, you're going to win it all, bro. Like, people keep saying how the Big Ten is going to be better than the SEC. Like, no way, bro. Like, the Big Ten went from a 3-team conference to a 6-team conference. Hooray. In the SEC, bro, like, you're like 8 9 teams deep in this thing, bro. Like, it's more great teams in this conference than just Georgia and Alabama. Like, now you're going to have Texas in there. You're going to have Oklahoma in there. You're going to have Ole Miss who's coming up. And then that's not even including the SEC team that we get every single season that comes out of nowhere, like how Tennessee did with Hendon Hooker, or how Missouri just did this past year with Eli Drinkwitz, winning 10-plus games for the first time since, 2014, 2013? Like, you see, I think people think that Texas and Oklahoma may come into this conference and be what Texas A&M and Missouri were their first couple of years. Like, they were a little bit of lightning in the bottle. You know, Texas A&M got into the SEC and they had Johnny football. And then Missouri had a really great defense. You know, you had Shane Ray, Michael Sam. And then after that, you just nosedive. I don't think that's going to happen. Like, Steve Sarkisian, this dude is a really good coach. All right, I know that he's had a few destinations that he's been in the past that hasn't worked out for him. He's had some off-the-field things that he's had to be. He's had some personal demons that he's had to fight. But I truthfully believe that Steve Sarkisian is becoming one of the best coaches in college football. Like, Texas football has gotten better every single season under him. I don't think Texas is going to fall off in the SEC. Oklahoma, like, I don't think you're going to become irrelevant, but I just think there's a good chance you could be a middle-of-the-pack team in this thing. So that's my thoughts on how Texas and Oklahoma are going to fare in the SEC, at least for 2024. Last thing is this. That might just be it, man. Like, that's it. That's it for this episode. So that's it for this episode. I appreciate all you guys for tuning in, listening to my passionate speeches. Like, sometimes I be thinking, like, I be tripping sometimes, like, when I really get in the zone and I really just be talking about some of these topics, because a lot of these topics, like, I don't really be having a lot of notes written down. You feel me? Like, I ain't really write down a lot of notes for this episode, because, like, I didn't really feel a need to have to take notes for this episode, bro. Like, FSU, let's just call it what it is, bro. Those boys quit on Mike Norvell. Mike Norvell didn't deserve that. FSU football didn't deserve that. That's why now FSU is fighting to get out of the ACC, bro, because now your program isn't really getting the respect that it deserves, bro. FSU is one of the most historically known programs in this sport. You can't tell the story of college football without mentioning Florida State football. Like Deion Sanders, Jameis Winston. There's been so many of college football's most recognizable stars that played with that program. Wearing that Seminoles helmet means something. The fact that, you know, they got left out of the playoffs and they got embarrassed by Georgia, like, it just continues to make that football program look a little bit worse than what it actually is. Like, Florida State is a really popular team. Anytime I talk about Florida State football, bro, the fans always show up. That's why I'm always talking about it. Like, people be like, bro, why the fuck are you a Miami fan talking about FSU football? The same reason I talk about FSU football is the same reason I talk about Miami football, bro. I like talking about it because it's always great fan engagement. There's always fans that tune in because people love Florida State football. And I love interacting with you guys. That's why I talk about Florida State football. And that's why, like, I went on that rant, bro, because that program deserved better than that. Like, I wish those players would have opted in. Like, I really was shocked that they opted out. I did not believe they were going to opt out. Because, I mean, the Alabama players last year, Will Anderson, Bryce Young, and Jameer Gibbs didn't opt out. But I appreciate everybody for tuning in. Appreciate everybody in the chat. Shout out to Mace Taggart. I'll hit you up early next week, man. Star, be good, family. I appreciate everybody in the chat, man. Shout out to everybody. Make sure you leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Check out the podcast. Every episode of the podcast that's uploaded on the channel is available in audio format on all podcasting platforms. I appreciate you guys for tuning in, and I'll see you guys shortly.